This is Podco Media Networks.
On episode 81 of Confessions of a Marketer, we're building a marketing machine. Hi, it's Mark Reed Edwards. Welcome back to Confessions of a Marketer. PrismHR CMO Scott Horn is back in to continue our chat about marketing a high-growth company. We'll get to that chat in just a moment. Next time, Angel Hollis-Vaccaro of Hux by Deloitte will be here to deconstruct the Beyond Marketing Experience Reimagined report that her firm released recently. And in the weeks ahead, we'll have AJ Wilcox on social media, Joe Martin on video, Mitch Duckler on differentiating your brand, and Steve Randazzo on experiences. Lots more in store, so stay tuned. I want to invite you to have a listen to my other venture, the Innovation Podcast, the iPod with Garnett Harriman. Lots of fun stuff happening over there. Head over to the innovationpodcast.co to tune in. Okay, back to Scott Horn. Scott is CMO at PrismHR. In the first part of our chat, we looked at how he approached his new job and interviewed candidates. Now we get a bit deeper. How does he run the marketing machine? He uses OKRs, a term that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Plus, we chat about the creative side of marketing and a possible brand refresh for PrismHR. Then we look at how the CMO role is evolving and get Scott's perspective on trends he's following. Let's get to it. So what are the key ingredients in a smooth-running marketing machine, do you think?
So my opinion is, I think first of all, you have to have clarity at both the team and individual level on what the goals are. And the old thing about smart metrics, specific, measurable, etc. You need to have both at a team level and then cascaded down through the team. You want every person on the team to go, I can look at my one sheet of metrics. And some people like to use, I like them, OKRs.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of OKRs.
We've talked a lot about that on the podcast.
Yeah, I like OKRs. You can do metrics.
I have some nightmares about OKRs. Yeah, we'll go into that a
we should.
time.
We should absolutely talk. So, but you want everybody to say at an individual level, I can see what I'm doing and it relates to both the team and the company. That's the first thing. Second, you need a strong management team. You've got to hold your managers accountable. Managers' jobs are to teach. One of the things, and I guilty as charged. Early in my career, I was like, wow, I get to be a manager. This is cool. I get to delegate stuff.
I got an office.
Exactly. And what you find when you become managers, you actually have less time. And the only way you get more time back is you got to make the people around you better. That's the only way. Otherwise, you're dead. So I think that's, so I look at several things. Does everybody know their objectives? Are managers having one-on-ones? How are we doing on hiring people? Then at a, kind of business level, do we understand our contributions to the sales pipeline? So whether it's appointments, whether it's sales accepted lead, what percentage is coming through marketing? And marketing, you can have literally an infinite amount of data. I mean, it literally is ridiculous. There's something like 5,000 plus MarTech tools. We're starting to build our marketing tech stack out. So it's what you pay attention to.
Use a few less than 5,000.
Yeah, we use a few. Well, my last company, we used probably 10, 15.
Right.
But then if you go talk to the web guys, probably 5 more. In fact, we were having a funny conversation with our CEO and senior leadership team meeting, and I may have been the one to ask the question, but it's like, how many applications do you think we have in the company? And I think the comment came up was, probably 30. I have at least 25, 30 in my group alone. My development peer, he's like, I've got X, Y, I've got at least 20. Product management has another. So it's, making these systems work. Yeah. So you got to look at, okay, what set of data do we care about? My data is usually around revenue. Yep. I care about revenue. How are we contributing to revenue? Yep. So sales with leads. Then the last thing I look at is, do we have the ability to look at the data on a regular basis? For example, one of the things I always ask people is, do you understand who's going to capture the baseline metric, who's responsible for it, and what that baseline metric is? I have a lot of people over the course of my career come to me, well, we should measure X. I'm like, great, what is that X today? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, let's go figure that out first. Figure out both who's going to capture, where you're going to capture from, and what the frequency of capturing it before we actually put it on a scorecard on something. So those are the things I look at. You look at things like, we haven't talked a lot about, for example, you're doing creativity. We haven't talked about the creative side of marketing at all. One of the things we're looking at is we are looking actively at doing a brand refresh. Coming in, we've got a fresh set of people. We're looking at, for example, things like our color palette. Sure. We love the company name, love the logo, but there's a lot of things that, as we're starting to scale out, have more marketing partners, more industry partners, more customers, we're realizing, wow, probably need to formalize some things that weren't formalized before. Tone, voice, how do we do iconography? So there's a whole creative side too, where you want things to look good too, because it instills people both in marketing and the company with a sense of pride.
Well, that's something, if you undertake it, I'd love to chronicle some of that.
Yeah, we're doing it right now. In fact, I think today we were looking at mood boards.
That's
the
fun.
second round of mood boards for color palette.
That's fun. So let's think a bit about the future. What do you think is in store for the CMO role over the next several years? How is it going to evolve?
So I'm biased, obviously. So first of all, I think the CMO should always have, for example, BDRs reporting into their world. That's one of the things I look for. I have it here, I have it last company. If I look at, and I say this with enormous respect for sales, my father is a retired salesperson, helped put me through college, so love sales. But typically speaking, a lot of traditional salespeople are relationship sellers, and this new world of data, and now, how do we do account targeting? What makes a good ideal customer profile? There are people out there who can do it, but they're in the minority. If you think about like market segmentation, market strategy, that's really kind of been the bailiwick of marketing people. Customer understanding, all those things. So I think there's a future where if you're going to build a high velocity B2B sales and marketing engine, I think marketing is going to have more and more of the charter there. I think marketing has the BDRs. I think marketing is going to be much, much more involved in, do we have the right sales stages? What's the criteria we use? I think, you do run into very good sales. I came from Silicon Valley, so my last role I was out in California in the Bay Area. They're even more biased towards sales tech because it's all happening out, not all, but a lot of it's happening out there, a lot of it here. And you do run into good sales ops people, but typically speaking, most sales leaders are not tech people. They're just not. That's not the background they came from. So I think, more of a unified sales and marketing tech, that's the way we're approaching it here. Is my last company, my team was responsible for unified sales and marketing tech strategy. So if I think forward, I think marketing will have an even larger place at the table in terms of what's going on with revenue, how do we go out and target people, what are the lead qualification, what's the marketing stages, we got to go build that pipeline. And I think a lot of people's perception of marketing, and it's like the old thing about, the four views of what college is like, what my parents think about college, what my friends think college is, what college really, marketing's kind of going through that. For some groups, marketing's like, they throw great parties.
Right.
For other people, it's like, they do beautiful advertising.
Right.
But what marketing really is about these days is revenue, data, technology, and customer understanding. And I don't think the perception of marketing necessarily is caught up. Like, I'll give my CEO credit. Even though he's not a marketer, he has a very, very forward-looking view of marketing that more aligns closely with what I just said. And I think some of that is a lot of people look at marketing differently than other disciplines. The thing that I've observed, I used to do blog posts at 2 companies ago, internal blog posts, and I did one called The Joy and Tragedy of Marketing. And the joy of marketing is marketing, unlike sales, unlike finance, unlike engineering, and I used to write software code. Marketing is the one discipline everybody's interested in. You can show them ads, you can show them a website, and people are like,
everyone's an expert.
Right. Well, but that's the tragedy side. Is I joke. I worked at Microsoft 17 years. You used to have software engineers come up to you and critique your ads, and I don't like the picture, and you get it. In fact, it's funny. I tell a story in one company. I had a very senior leader, great person, come into me one day and said, "I think marketing's doing an amazing job." And I was like, "Why do you think that?" He goes, "Well, my wife and I were in Costco this weekend, and we saw the product packaging." This was a consumer B2C product. We saw the packaging for the product, and she just said it looked amazing. He goes, "You guys are doing a great job." And I'm like, "Well, thank you." But, and then you get into what I call the My Best Buy problem, which I've also run into, where somebody comes back from their visit to their Best Buy and goes, "Marketing's doing a terrible job. I went into the Best Buy this weekend, and they had no clue about our products." So I usually have to stop person. I said, it's 1,300 Best Buys at that point in time. Did you go into any other ones? No, I didn't. So that's the joy and the tragedy.
Drawing a conclusion based on one data point.
Right, and and I think I hope I see a lot of marketers out there. I have a lot of marketing people I'm friendly with in the community, CMOs at all levels. I do see a lot of marketing people really pushing towards hey, my job is revenue, my job is customer understanding, My job is accelerating revenue velocity. And I think particularly in B2B, you see that. You do see it in B2C as well. But you also see old school B2C, and my job is doing advertising. In fact, we didn't talk about it, but one of the things I look for when I accept a marketing role, having done this 4 times, is you're really looking for, do you have the ability to have the levers? Mm-hmm. So for example, I've had people approach me about roles where it's like, you're responsible for the brand demand gen, but you don't have product marketing. I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
So you're telling me I'm responsible for the revenue and the brand, but basically we can't message the products against that unless we just go agree with somebody agrees. So I think you need the levers. That's why I think the BDRs are important as well.
It's the Bill Parcells line about, if you want me to make dinner, let me buy the groceries.
That is a great line. I love that line by Bill Parcells. That's a good line.
So are there any trends you're following that in marketing in general that you think are kind of bubbling up?
Yeah, there's a few. I think account-based marketing is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
People think it's one thing. It's really a continuum of things. We haven't done as much here, but as we start to go on behalf of our partners direct to small and medium businesses, I think as we get to the upper level, called the 500 plus employee accounts, we're going to start doing account-based marketing. And all I tell account-based people is account-based marketing is essentially you want to do some level of personalization and targeting. That could be at a vertical level, it could be at a company level, it could be at an individual person level. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really interesting. I think the quest for better data is ongoing. How do you make sure that what you have in your database is good? LinkedIn is a useful tool, but most people, as I point out, most people use LinkedIn for job searching, so they don't use work email on LinkedIn.
And it's kind of becoming a spam.
That is true too. But there's other tools out there, and we're looking. One of the challenges with all the regulatory privacy rules, we're U.S. focused here, so we don't have to deal with the GDPR in Europe. My last company, we were like, oh my God, GDPR is tying us up in knots.
Yeah.
But you have California and other states looking at similar rules. How do you go out and basically build a customer list in a market segment where you think you provide value, but you don't have them in your database? How do you go do that? Setting up a booth at a trade show is probably one of the least efficient ways to do it. But, we may all be forced to do that.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
So I think those are interesting trends we're looking at. And then, of course, there's all the, I don't know about you, but I get literally 20 solicitations a day. I think CMOs must be one of the most solicited people out there because everybody figured out the marketing people have budget, so they're all after us. I get 20 solicitations a day, and I used to be polite and try to reply, no thank you. Now I just hit delete because it's just too much to keep up with. But there is interesting tech out there, and we try to keep an eye on it.
And that's the problem when you get those solicitations like on LinkedIn. Yep. Some of them may be valuable, but there's just so many of them that come in that you just don't know what's good and what's bad.
Well, and I kind of alluded to this earlier. One of the things that I'm fortunate about is having a tech background. I have a comp sci degree, and I was a software engineer. I have a healthy skepticism of technology, having built it. I used to do componentized operating systems on multiple chip architectures. So I'm one of those people, I don't believe, when people come in and say, our tech can solve all your problems, I start asking questions. And you'll run into a lot of companies, we use AI and we can give you perfect accounts to profile. I'm like, well, how do you do that? We aggregate a bunch of data from a bunch of companies. Well, are those companies like us? Do they sell in similar industries, similar types of people? And the answer is more often than not, no.
Yeah, we were interviewing on another podcast of mine, the Innovation Podcast. We were interviewing someone in the financial services area who deals with elder tech.
Okay, interesting.
Really fascinating area. And we asked him, well, how do you do this? Do you use AI? And he paused for a moment and said, well, if I were talking to a VC right now, I'd probably say yes.
You betcha.
But really, in reality, you don't need AI to do whatever the function was that he was talking about. And he uses people.
Yeah.
And real intelligence, not artificial intelligence.
Well, it's funny. My last company was AI-enabled chatbots. And the funny thing we were joking about is, okay, when is software not AI software? Because so many companies are sticking AI in the end of the name.
Well, especially chatbots.
Oh, yeah. And chatbots, not to go, because it's a whole different conversation. There's a wide continuum of capabilities. But, we used to joke, like, when is something not AI anymore? Because it's becoming rapidly the point where all software is AI, which is not true. And the traditional notion of AI is software that learns by itself, that doesn't really occur,
Yeah.
broadly speaking, anywhere in the world.
It's like saying we've got an algorithm.
Right.
It's just a marketing term more than a scientific or data term.
And again, not to go too far in the rabbit hole, AI is always, to your point, algorithms and relevant data. That's why having a data a large data corpus is important.
Right.
You'll run into these startup companies and they have an algorithm, but they have no data.
Right.
And their whole, in fact, it's funny, in real time, one of the companies we're working with to do outsourcing services just asked me yesterday, can we aggregate your data into our data lake? And we'll come back and we'll give you value from it. I'm like, well, I don't think you're going to have many companies that are doing what we do in your data pool, so I'm not sure there's value for us.
So what's your data lake going to do
Exactly.
for me? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, this has been a fascinating discussion, Scott. Really
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, next time, Angel Hollis Vaccaro of Hux by Deloitte is here, so stay with us. This episode of Confessions of a Marketer was written, produced, and edited by yours truly. T. Jordan of A-Class Productions wrote the theme music. Confessions of a Marketer is a trademark of Podco Media Networks, and this episode is copyright 2019. I'm Mark Reed Edwards. See you next time.